Hi boys and girls. Today's story has a very familiar character in it. This character is small, brown and furry, and his really good friend is the tall man with the yellow hat. Do you think you know who it is? If you guessed Curious George, then you are right. And in today's story, Curious George is going to the zoo. So let's find out what happens in the story. Curious George goes to the zoo. This is George. George is a good little monkey and always very curious. Today, George was feeling very excited. The man with the yellow hat was taking him to the zoo. As they drove, the man explained to George that this wasn't just any zoo that they were going to visit. It's called the Wild Animal Park, the man said. All of the animals roam around freely. That seems like that would be fun. When they arrived, George saw a huge banner. George looked up at it, but he couldn't read the words. A friendly zookeeper explained. "It's an extra special day here at the Wild Animal Park," she said. "It is our baby rhino's first birthday. We are going to have a party for her later on." A party? This was going to be a wonderful trip to the zoo. George tried to walk into the park where the animals were, but the zookeeper stopped him. "You can't walk in there," she said. "To explore the zoo, you have to ride in one of our special cars." She pointed to a huge car that had no roof on it. Oh my! What fun this is going to be! George and his friend climbed on board and the car drove into the park. That would be kind of fun, wouldn't it? Imagine being here. All of the animals just roaming freely. Soon they were in the midst of the Wild Animal Park. "Look over there," said the zookeeper. "There's our pride of lions. We have a large family here." George pointed in the other direction. "Yes, George," said the zookeeper. "I see the giraffes too. Their tall necks help them eat leaves from the treetops. And there are 2 ostriches running this way too." George was happy to be seeing so many animals. I see some zebras, some elephants. I wonder what other animals they're going to see here today. The zoo car drove past a small pond. Pink flamingos waded in the water. Their heads bopped up and down as they walked on spindly legs. "The flamingos turn pink because they eat so many tiny pink shrimp," said the zookeeper, but George was not listening. He had never seen flamingos before. He was curious about how those flamingos were moving. He leaned out the back of the zoo car as far as he could to take a look. But then, what happened? What do you think happened, guys? He was really leaning off the end of the car. This might not be good. First, George lost his balance. Then, he fell, kerplunk, right out of the zoo car. His friend hadn't noticed that he had fallen. George ran as quickly as a little monkey could toward the pond. The flamingos bobbed up their heads and lifted their feet one at a time. It looked like they were dancing, so George danced with them. But suddenly, the water in the pond started to move. Then a hippo popped its head out from under the water. What a surprise! George stopped dancing to take a look. The hippo opened its huge mouth as if it were yawning. George opened his mouth wide too. It was fun to act like a hippo. How would you feel if you were stuck in the water with a big hippo like that? Looks like George is actually excited and happy, but I think I would be worried and scared. Just then, George noticed that something was rustling in the reeds near the pond. George was curious. He wanted to see what was there. In an instant, he jumped over to the reeds. He poked his head inside and saw a baby rhino. The tiny rhino was cute, but she looked a little bit sad and a little bit lonely. Why do you think she's feeling sad and lonely? George wanted to make that baby rhino feel happy again. He thought and thought, maybe the baby rhino would like the flamingo dance. So he jumped and bobbed his head and danced with his feet up and down. The baby rhino peeked her head out of the reeds so that she could watch. So George danced more, and the baby rhino walked out of the reeds. She was curious too. They were having so much fun that George didn't notice what was behind him. Look who's coming behind him. I wonder how she's going to react. The zookeeper stomped over to George. She did not look happy. Why do you think she isn't happy? The man with the yellow hat was running behind her. "You are a naughty little monkey," said the zookeeper. "You were supposed to stay in the car. You and your friend will have to go now." Uh-oh, I think that's what happens if you go to the zoo and you don't listen to the directions. You might have to leave too. George walked to the man's side. He waved goodbye to the baby rhino. The man and the zookeeper turned to see whom George was waving to. The baby rhino! "Why, we've been looking for her all day," said the zookeeper. "She got separated from her mom. That's why she was alone and feeling scared and lonely." George was glad to see the zookeeper looking happy again. He and the man started walking towards the exit. The zookeeper ran to stop them. "Thank you for finding our baby rhino, George, and just in time for her birthday party. Will you join us for some cake?" George jumped up with glee. That means that he was super excited. He had forgotten about the party, and he did love cake. The man and George followed the zookeeper and the baby rhino back to the zoo headquarters. The rhino's mother was waiting there for her. How do you think they're going to feel when they're finally reunited? They look happy. The zookeeper brought out a special birthday cake that was shaped like a rhino. George had never seen a cake like that before. "You can have the first piece, George," said the zookeeper. "I also have a special treat, just for you." She placed a bunch of bananas in front of him. George was very happy to have a tasty banana, but he saved room for some cake, too. How did you like that story? Now think about those questions that we send out. Think about the characters, where the story happened, and if you can make any connections to any of the stories we've read this week or some other stories that you have read before. Thanks.